It was the kind of morning where nothing seemed out of place. A cold, gray winter day in Warren, Michigan. The kind of day where you grab a coat, start the car, and go about your routine. For Ashley Elkins, a 34-year-old mother of 2 young boys, January of 2025 was supposed to be the start of a new chapter. She had her whole life ahead of her. Ashley wasn't just another face in the crowd. Friends described her as radiant, full of energy and fiercely devoted to her children. She had grown up in Michigan, rooted in family values, and while life hadn't always been easy, she approached each day with a mix of resilience and warmth. She was the kind of person who could light up a room with her smile, and more importantly, she was the kind of mother who lived for her sons. They were her world, her purpose, and her joy. On the morning she disappeared, nothing seemed unusual. Ashley had errands to run, just the typical things most of us do without thinking twice. She left her home in Warren, kissed her boys goodbye, and got into her car. Her plan was simple: take care of a few tasks, come back, and spend the rest of the day with her family. But Ashley would never come home. When she failed to return that afternoon, her family grew concerned. At first, they told themselves it was nothing serious. Maybe she'd gotten caught up with friends, maybe she was shopping, maybe traffic had slowed her down. But when hours turned into a full day, worry turned into panic. Calls to her phone went unanswered, texts sat unread, and the chilling reality began to sink in. Something was wrong. For her children, the absence of their mother was immediate and terrifying. For her family, it was the beginning of a nightmare that would stretch on for days. And for police, it was the start of a case that would spiral into one of the most disturbing discoveries Michigan had seen in years. By the second day, Ashley's family reported her missing. Police in Warren treated it as a serious case from the beginning. Unlike adults who sometimes disappear voluntarily, Ashley didn't fit that profile at all. She was a devoted mother, deeply tied to her family and her children. She had responsibilities, a life she loved, and no history of simply walking away. Investigators began with the basics. They retraced her last known movements, interviewed family, and pulled her phone records. What they uncovered almost immediately deepened the mystery. Ashley's phone had last pinged near Roseville, a nearby town just a few miles from her home. The location was strange. She had no known reason to be there, no family or friends in that area. It was as if her trail had abruptly ended in an unfamiliar place. Then came the discovery that raised every alarm bell. 5 days after she vanished, Ashley's car was found parked outside an apartment complex in Roseville. At first glance, the vehicle appeared abandoned, left there without explanation. Inside the car there were no obvious signs of struggle, no broken glass, no blood, no violent scene that screamed crime. Ashley's purse was missing, her phone was gone, and perhaps most telling of all, the car keys weren't there. Whoever left the vehicle had made sure to take everything important with them, leaving police to wonder if Ashley had driven there herself, or if someone else had taken her. For Ashley's family, each new development was torture. They gathered for searches, handed out flyers, and pleaded with the public for information. Every day that passed felt like a lifetime. Her children asked questions no parent or grandparent ever wants to answer. When is mommy coming home? The Warren Police Department, now working closely with Roseville authorities, began digging deeper. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex was pulled, and investigators pored over hours of video. What they saw would eventually provide crucial insight into what happened that morning. The footage didn't show Ashley walking away from her car. In fact, it didn't show her at all. But it did show another figure. A man, someone moving near the car around the time it was believed to have been abandoned. His movements were cautious, deliberate, and out of place. To the trained eye of detectives, it looked less like a casual visit, and more like someone hiding something. Who was this man, and why was he near Ashley's car? That question began to drive the investigation forward. Detectives knew that in most missing person cases, answers come not from strangers, but from those closest to the victim. Husbands, boyfriends, partners, friends. People who know the victim best often hold the most information, whether innocent or guilty. As investigators began mapping Ashley's recent life, they found cracks, tension in her personal relationships, disputes that hinted at darker undercurrents. But there was one person in particular whose name kept surfacing, someone whose connection to Ashley was too close, too intense, to ignore. Meanwhile, the search for Ashley stretched on. Volunteers combed wooded areas, police dogs scoured fields, flyers with her photo lined the streets of Warren and Roseville. And then came the discovery that would change the case forever. A tip led investigators to an area outside the city, a place that seemed unlikely at first glance. A landfill. Not a place most people would expect a missing person investigation to lead, but for detectives it was a grim possibility they couldn't ignore. For days, police and forensic teams sifted through acres of garbage. It was slow, grueling work. Cold weather made it even harder, and the emotional toll was crushing. But with each bag, each layer of debris moved aside, they grew closer to the truth. The nature of the evidence was grim, a discovery that shifted the case from a missing person search to a homicide investigation. What police uncovered in that landfill would expose a plan so depraved, so calculated, that it shocked even seasoned detectives. The disappearance of a devoted mother of two was no longer a mystery of chance. It was something darker, something deliberate. And behind it all was a suspect who believed he could outsmart everyone. But as investigators would soon prove, he was wrong. The discovery at the landfill changed everything. What had begun as a desperate search for a missing woman had now become a full-fledged homicide investigation. Police were no longer asking, "Where is Ashley?" Instead they were asking, "Who killed her and why?" The evidence recovered was grim. While authorities kept many details close to the vest in those early days, what they did reveal was enough to chill the community. Among the debris were personal belongings linked directly to Ashley, items she never would have discarded willingly. It was a clear sign that someone had tried to hide her disappearance, to erase her from existence by burying the truth under mountains of garbage. The landfill search was no accident. Investigators had been led there for a reason. Surveillance footage from Roseville, combined with witness statements, pointed detectives toward a man with a troubling connection to Ashley. Someone she had trusted, someone who on the surface had no reason to harm her, but whose actions told a different story. From the very beginning, justice had been on the radar. He had a complicated relationship with Ashley, marked by tension and volatility. Friends described their relationship as rocky, sometimes loving, sometimes explosive. And in the weeks leading up to Ashley's disappearance, there were signs things had taken a darker turn. Arguments, jealousy, control. When Ashley first went missing, Justice's behavior raised eyebrows. He was noticeably calm. Too calm, investigators thought, for someone whose partner had vanished without a trace. While Ashley's family was frantic, pleading for answers, organizing searches, praying for a miracle, Justice maintained an unsettling composure. And then came the surveillance footage. Cameras in Roseville had captured a man near Ashley's car around the time it was abandoned. His build, his movements, his clothing, everything pointed toward Justice. Detectives began pressing harder. They interviewed Justice multiple times, probing for inconsistencies in his story. And inconsistencies quickly emerged. First, he claimed Ashley had simply gone out and never returned. Then, he suggested maybe she had chosen to leave to take a break. But to those who knew her best, the idea was absurd. Ashley wouldn't abandon her children. As police dug deeper, they uncovered even more disturbing details. On Justice's phone, forensic experts found searches that hinted at something sinister. Questions about disposing of evidence, questions about erasing digital trails, questions that no innocent man should be asking. Investigators traced garbage routes from Justice's apartment complex, connecting them directly to the area of the landfill where Ashley-related evidence was eventually found. It was a direct link, one that tied Justice not just to her disappearance, but to an attempt to cover up what he had done. Meanwhile, the community was on edge. The story of Ashley Elkins spread far beyond Warren and Roseville, capturing the attention of true crime followers nationwide. A young mother vanished in the dead of winter. A car left abandoned. A landfill search yielding horrifying clues. And a boyfriend whose calm demeanor and shifting stories only deepened suspicion. For Ashley's family, the pain was unbearable. Her parents spoke publicly, their voices breaking as they begged for justice. Her children were shielded as best as possible, but the absence of their mother was a wound too deep to ignore. Each day without answers was agony, but each development pointed toward a devastating conclusion. Finally, investigators had enough to move. In February of 2025, just weeks after Ashley vanished, police arrested Christopher Justice. He was charged with her murder, accused of orchestrating a plan so cold and calculated that it left even veteran detectives shaken. But the arrest was only the beginning. As prosecutors began building their case, the extent of Justice's depravity came into focus. Evidence revealed he had not acted in a moment of passion, not in a sudden rage. This was something far worse. A deliberate plan, a premeditated act. He had studied, researched, and prepared. But what he didn't count on was the persistence of investigators. The landfill search, the surveillance footage, the digital forensics. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and it painted a horrifying picture. Justice believed he could outsmart the system. He believed he could stage a disappearance, make it look like Ashley had left of her own free will, and then move on with his life unscathed. But he underestimated the tenacity of Ashley's loved ones, who refused to stop searching. He underestimated the skill of law enforcement, who refused to let details slip through the cracks. And most importantly, he underestimated Ashley herself, because even in her absence, she left behind traces of the truth that would expose her killer. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors prepared to show jurors not only what Justice had done, but how he had planned it. They would reveal the internet searches, the surveillance footage, the landfill evidence. They would call witnesses who had seen Ashley in the days leading up to her disappearance. Witnesses who could testify about the tension in her relationship. And they would tell the story of a mother who never stopped fighting for her children, even in her final moments. The murder of Ashley Elkins wasn't just another crime, it was a story of betrayal, of cold calculation, and of the relentless pursuit of justice. But the darkest revelations were still to come, because as investigators would uncover, Justice's plan wasn't just to kill Ashley, it was to destroy her completely. And it was only through painstaking work, through garbage sifted by hand, through hours of surveillance footage, through tireless dedication, that police managed to piece together the truth he tried so hard to bury. Ashley's story was far from over. The arrest of her killer was just one chapter. Ahead lay a courtroom, a trial, and a verdict that would decide whether Justice, ironically named, would finally face the consequences of his monstrous crime. For now though, one thing was clear. The mask had slipped. The man who once pretended to be Ashley's partner, her companion, her lover, was exposed for what he truly was. A predator, a manipulator, and a murderer. But how exactly did the trial unfold? What details of Justice's plan would emerge in court? Those answers would come in the final chapter of this story, a chapter that would deliver justice in every sense of the word. The arrest of Christopher Justice brought a temporary sense of relief to the community, but for Ashley's family, relief was far from justice. Her loved ones wanted answers, they wanted accountability, and above all, they wanted to ensure Ashley's story would not be silenced. When Justice appeared in court for the first time, the image was haunting. Dressed in a standard jail jumpsuit, his once confident posture seemed diminished, but his expression remained unsettlingly calm. It was the same detached composure he had shown when Ashley first went missing, a look that suggested arrogance rather than remorse. They argued that Ashley's disappearance was no tragic accident, no misunderstanding, no case of a woman simply walking away from her life. They began with the timeline. Surveillance footage became one of the cornerstone pieces of evidence. Then came the forensic evidence. Perhaps the most heartbreaking evidence came from Ashley's family and friends. They painted a portrait of a woman whose life revolved around her children, whose every decision was guided by love and responsibility. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, and the verdict was read, guilty. Thank you for joining me in uncovering this heartbreaking case. If you found this story important, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. It helps us continue to tell stories that matter, and ensures Ashley's story and others like hers are never forgotten. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next case.